All right, pleasure to be back with you again at the Smart Protein Summit Day 5. It's the final day, and it's been quite a whirlwind time. I'm sure you've noticed that there have been perspectives that we've taken from across the industry, whether it's large corporations, entrepreneurs, scientists, people outside India, policymakers like Honorable Pinaki Mishra this morning. And we're really, really excited actually to make a major announcement, something of a surprise announcement in this particular session. So I'm going to kick on with it because we don't have that much time. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. Excuse me. All right. Can you confirm this is good? You can see this? Great, thank you. So as we've discussed during the course of the summit, from where we were a couple of years ago, the Indian alternative protein, the smart protein industry has progressed a great deal. I mentioned in the State of the Industry session on day one that we now have a few dozen entrepreneurs, including, of course, the ones that you've seen over the course of the summit on panels and during the wonderful innovators showcases that are formulating products and bringing them to market that we consider to be on a path to bringing these products to market and solving the problems that they would like to solve. That being said, there still remain a number of bottlenecks across the value chain. And this is a function or an artifact of the fact that many of these entrepreneurs are quite early in their life cycle. So if you look at, for example, I was mentioning that something like 50, 60% of the entrepreneurs that we have in our network have actually started companies within the last couple of years, and even more of them have become serious in the last couple of years or 18 months. That's very exciting. It indicates momentum in the sector, but it also shows that many of these entrepreneurs and their companies may be earlier in their maturity. So for example, if we take the plant-based meat, egg, and dairy value chain, if you look at, and this is the kind of work that GFI India does, by the way, we break down the opportunities and the challenges across all of these areas. If you look at any of these things across both the production cycle as well as later on, let's take, for example, production methods. We've talked at great length about the fact that equipment for processing, whether at a lab scale or a pilot scale or a manufacturing scale, remains essentially a bottleneck within the Indian ecosystem. If there is not a lot of high moisture extrusion capacity, you will not see the next generation plant-based meats on the market. If this is a particular bottleneck, then you won't be able to see a slew of entrepreneurs bring products to market. So what we've seen is at this stage of the industry, given that there are these bottlenecks from farm to fork across the value chain and across the industry, and there is a need to unblock some of these bottlenecks in a way that lifts all boats, as we've been talking about throughout this conference, there might be some opportunities for multi-stakeholder partnerships. In fact, we believe it's the right time to think about multi-stakeholder partnerships. We are advanced enough where there's a lot of attention on the space, and yet early enough that we might consider these partnerships to be pre-competitive and not competing against each other. So here are some examples of what I mean. I mentioned, of course, processing and from lab to pilot scale to the market, there might be some issues with a dearth of equipment out there in the market. So if we look at, for example, setting up lab or kitchen scale facilities that could allow multiple entrepreneurs to come in, or pilot scale product optimization, where even getting a sample of my product as an entrepreneur is a huge bottleneck currently in the industry. We look at, I've mentioned this during the session that Dhruvi did a couple of days ago, focused on understanding the Indian consumer. Market research and consumer insights seem to be a challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs as well. So it becomes a difficulty to figure out how they're positioning their product, segmenting the market, etc. On the investment side, many investors are interested in this space, as we've talked about. We talked about it with Rajiv Chitrabhanu. We saw it with Andrew and Chirag as well of Big Idea Ventures and Ashika Group, that investors are definitely interested in this landscape, but with many of them, not the ones that I mentioned, but with many others, there may be an opportunity to educate them a little bit more in terms of doing due diligence on the sector and the companies where they may not otherwise have had that capability. And then finally, of course, regulatory representation. When a company is quite new or nascent, it becomes very difficult to get the institutional knowledge and to spend the money to think about how to represent to the authorities. Now, on that note, I'm actually going to stop and bring in two experts that we have with us, whom we're very excited to talk to, who can tell us a little bit more about this landscape and what the issues may be. First, I'm going to introduce Mr. Dheeraj Talreja. Dheeraj is president of AAK India, With 20 plus years of experience spanning sales, marketing, innovation management, and sustainability in various geographies, he leads Asia's plant-based food segment for AAK to develop a conducive ecosystem for plant-based food in the region. And they've been wonderful partners of GFI India's as well. Dheeraj, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Varun. So Varun, thanks a lot to you and the GFI team for your commitment to drive the positive impact on the overall ecosystem with that. I think I'll just give a quick background about the company, and I'll just jump to what are the challenges that I'm seeing closely in the entire development cycle, which the plant-based food ecosystem is facing with that. AAK is 140-year-old company operating primarily in the space of specialty oil and fat, and the DNA of the company is co-development actually. And maybe let me quickly show that what do we mean by co-development. This is what we mean by co-development, which focuses on supporting the startups, supporting the conventional companies to support right from ideation until the commercialization with that. And we have been working with you and your team closely to develop the plant-based food ecosystem. And over the last 1 year, we are engaged in working with 30 plus active projects. Actually, some have been commercially launched and more are going to follow with that. As Andrew mentioned, two major disruptions in the ecosystem, transportation and the food. Actually, this is for the first time we are seeing a disruption in the food segment with that. Then definitely there are bound to be challenges which the people are going to face right from ideation to the launch. Some of you touched already on that one, but let me give you a closer perspective when I'm looking to all this development with that. I see that the value chain is facing a lot of challenges right from perspective of product development in terms of customization, because you need to customize. I mean, it's India is very different. Your food changes every few hundred kilometers with that. Scaling up, that's another bigger issue which the people are facing in terms of how to scale it up actually. And when they are starting with that, when they don't know the market size, then they require a smaller quantities to do the development with that. Regulatory challenges, labeling challenges in terms of that, and marketing and positioning of the products with that. And for that, the co-development approach that I talked about and our customer innovation center that we have in Mumbai, I believe that collaboration is the way forward to address and remove some of the bottlenecks and in this space with that. I mean, as AAK and GFI, we are committed to support this one, and I think and looking forward to work on a common platform to bring different players in the value chain to develop a sustainable ecosystem on plant-based food.
Dheeraj, thank you so much. And AAK has been invaluable to the ecosystem in India. I also think that from a regulatory standpoint, your support has been very key as well to help the regulators understand what these new types of foods are and help entrepreneurs also represent to the regulators. So thank you so much for that. So speaking of regulation, and by the way, Dheeraj is exactly right. Across this production cycle, the opportunity for co-development and collaboration will move things forward much more than entrepreneurs perhaps operating in silos. So 30 plus projects and many more to come to market soon. And of course, many more in the pipeline as well. So I'm going to introduce our second guest, Anirudh Rastogi of Ikigai Law. Anirudh is the founder of Ikigai Law, which is an award-winning law firm working with leading global technology companies and startups. He has advised highly complex technology initiatives ranging from space missions, satellite manufacturers to cryptocurrency exchanges, as well as alternative protein product manufacturers in the last several months. Ikigai Law has been recognized as one of Asia's best law firms to work for by Asian Law Business and Law Firm of the Year in the mid-size segment by IDEX Legal. Anirudh was also Business World Achiever of the Year in 2017. The Economic Times named Anirudh the pioneer for his contribution to drone regulations in India. And as you can tell, there's a bit of a theme in terms of Anirudh's work across novel technologies. He's graduated from Harvard Law School and shares a keen interest in the intersection between tech, law, and policy. Anirudh, welcome. You're on mute.
Yes, hi, Varun. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I've had a wonderful opportunity, you and your team, to interact with a number of smart protein companies recently, and more so in making submissions to the FSSAI recently on the dairy analogs labeling issue. And as I do that, and I think one key challenge that I kind of see in this industry is for the regulator to take us, a young, very small industry at this point in time, as seriously as it should. And the reason simply would be that, and this is something I speak from experience, with in multiple other industries, where the regulator is always already stretched from a bandwidth standpoint, is overwhelmed with regulating for the incumbent already, right? And so it's always a challenge. There's always that tension. And I think I feel that an effective association for any kind of in any new industry, an effective industry association is of paramount importance. What it does really is help in kind of making providing for a sane conversation, a meaningful conversation and engagement with the regulator and this industry. And that becomes particularly challenging where in a rapidly evolving industry, for the regulator to keep pace with what's happening is tough, right? So that's where an association can really help. What it also does is help the industry find common ground and then communicate with the regulator in one voice. And that becomes difficult because even in a small industry like ours, there would be multiple industry segments, sub-segments, right? So you would have the plant-based protein guys, for example, who would have slightly differing kind of interests or differing themes which need attention. And it is very important for an association to find common ground and bring all of them together to be able to then engage meaningfully with the regulator. And one last thing that I would like to say here is that what an industry association also does is help you self-regulate. And I can't emphasize enough on the importance of that. Because if a young industry, an evolving industry does not self-regulate, then the regulator has to step in at some point in time to do so, right? And when the regulator comes in, it typically leans towards a harder, a heavier touch kind of approach to regulation. That's simply because, as I've said earlier, it's hard to keep pace with what's happening in such a complex, new, emerging industry, and so. The industry itself is always best placed to kind of regulate itself from that standpoint. And there are enough examples of that, right? So the Plant-Based Foods Association, for example, has come up with voluntary labeling standards for plant-based food. You have, in fact, in other industries, we've seen where the regulators themselves have recommended setting up associations to achieve this. So the telecom regulator, for instance, recently recommended that the cloud services industry organize itself as an association. So there are examples of this, and I think it would really help us as an industry to start thinking about organizing ourselves in that fashion.
Thank you, Anirudh. Very well said. And of course, I think you were referring to the US Plant-Based Foods Association there, or even the China Plant-Based Foods Association. There's so many of them. GFI Europe, our partners in Europe recently also were part of a team that launched, or a group of organizations that launched, the European Alliance for Plant-Based Foods. Anirudh, Dheeraj, I'll just ask you to stick around actually to just give us some comments at the end of this presentation. I'm going to go back into my presentation actually. Excuse me. Right. So I was talking about multi-stakeholder collaborations that are possible, and Dheeraj and Anirudh gave their own perspectives, their expert perspectives, indicating that they have also seen similar needs for this, as we all have, if you're operating in the industry over the last year, 24 months, etc. So I'm very proud to announce, Anirudh kind of preempted this, I'm very proud to announce that with the support of our partners across the entire value chain, GFI India is going to go ahead and form a proto association of sorts. We're calling it the Alt Protein Industry Forum. The reason that we're not going ahead and forming an association immediately is because it might not be time to do so. But this is going to be a pretty pivotal landscape shaper over the next few years in order to advance the entire industry. So I'll give you an example of what this means. We're going to convene players across the ecosystem on one platform and ask key questions. So going back to the bottleneck that I and many people over the course of the summit have outlined, the bottleneck in production of plant-based meat, egg, and dairy, we might convene expert panels who consist of people like Dheeraj, like Anirudh, like all of you out there who are entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers, and investors, as well as consumers, to think through how we can perhaps establish more lab and pilot and manufacturing scale infrastructure for the space to unblock that bottleneck of production. Additionally, we will be convening actors across the ecosystem who include retailers, food service operators, distributors, to present market data and get everyone aligned on how to position these products and how consumers are seeing these products. And then finally, of course, we will have a bias towards action. So we'll synthesize opportunities that come through from these meetings, and we will focus on forging collaboration. So for example, if there are entrepreneurs who are starting manufacturing facilities like Be Veg Foods, whom we've talked about during the course of the summit, there may be opportunities to immediately put them together with plant-based entrepreneurs who would then guarantee offtake or guarantee buying of those products that come out of there, in order to make sure that any partnership is rapid and brings products to market very rapidly as well. So in terms of how this is going to work, as I mentioned earlier, the industry is perhaps not ready for a full-fledged association. In working with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we've seen in the landscape, there perhaps is not the ability to get into financial commitments that might be created by an industry association. So we're focusing on creating a platform that's very simple. GFI India will convene this platform, no obligations, no financial commitments. Sessions, in order to reduce the pressure of sharing and confidentiality, sessions will be closed door, what's known as Chatham House rules. Any statements will not be assigned to any individual person or ascribed to any individual person unless otherwise specified. And any partnerships leading on from this, there will be no obligation to share that there was a partnership that came out of it. You're free to take any partnerships offline. In terms of how we're going to convene these, there'll be regular roundtables and ad hoc working groups. For example, we've already received commitments from several partners to convene an alternative seafood working group based on a lot of the things that we've been discussing over the course of this summit. And then we've also, as Anirudh mentioned, been talking about regulation with a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly with respect to dairy labeling or other things as well. We're going to focus on keeping it focused and curated. So a lot of these meetings will be by invite only. They'll be closed door, as I mentioned earlier. An important piece of what we're talking about is, I want to hark to the end of this statement right here. We would love to have participation from incumbents from the meat, egg, and dairy industries, because they're a key piece of the diversification of protein. They already have distribution, they already have knowledge of the consumer, etc. But startups in the alternative protein space, food, agri, and biotech corporations, co-manufacturers who are critical to the growth of this space, retailers, distributors, food service operators, regulatory experts like Anirudh and his team, farmer representatives, other nonprofits that connect to farmers and talk about and work in the environment, etc., are all going to be welcome and invited to these over the next several months. And then finally, excitingly enough, we're going to have a kickoff roundtable, which we're going to invite a number of stakeholders to, including if you've been a part of this summit, then you can possibly expect some communications from us. We've planned this for the end of 2020 in the next couple of months. And thrillingly enough, we've received support from the World Economic Forum's Future of Protein initiative. Lisa Sweet from the Future of Protein initiative is going to be on the next panel right after this, so we'll talk to her about that. But this is, I can't stress how pivotal this support will be to the growth of this All Protein Industry Forum to kick it off with this wonderful roundtable. So that's what we have been excited to announce this afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you are. Dheeraj and Anirudh, I'm going to hand it back to you for some final comments before we close and move on to the next panel. Shall we start with Dheeraj?
I think I will only close it by saying that let's work together, let's collaborate together to accelerate the drive from scarcity to abundance.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited with this announcement. I look forward to contributing me and my team in whatever way we can. And there's a lot of action in India. Let's look forward to doing some great stuff with this.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dheeraj and Anirudh, for being with us today. And if you're in the audience and you're interested in participating in the alternative protein, in the India All Protein Industry Forum, please get in touch with us. We will also be reaching out to all of the stakeholders whom we know would benefit from this. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I can't stress once again how excited we are with this initiative. We really think that it's going to almost supercharge a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years. We think that there's a huge opportunity to create this industry-wide collaboration and take this sector to the next level. So this is our effort to do that. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next panel.
Thanks, Varun. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.